Good Saturday morning and happy October, everybody. October 2nd. We are just flying through this year, this fall, and this football season. Already week 5 of the year. Welcome into the Alabama pregame show presented by Medical Properties Trust. The number 1 ranked Tide, the SEC CBS game of the week. Tide hosting number 12 Ole Miss today at Bryant-Denny Stadium. A huge opportunity for both of these teams early in the SEC schedule. Some people are arguing this is one of the toughest games, if not the toughest game that Bama will play this year, judging by how Ole Miss has been, at least offensively. We'll get into that. But, Matt, just want to just quickly talk about what this matchup means for both of these teams with the outlook for the rest of the season. I mean, it's early, but it matters early.
Absolutely. A huge game. This, in many ways, feels like one of those. I'm not gonna call it this, okay? So calm down. But we've had these various games that get labeled game of the century in the past 20 years or whatever. I think we've already had probably 10 of them. But this has a little bit of that vibe to it. Like, people have been looking forward to this game since long before this season even started. There were people talking about this game the day after the national championship game in January. So that's why I bring up the game of the century comparison. It's one of those games that in some ways is bigger than the rest of the season. It almost sticks out from the rest of college football because people who don't care about either of these teams all over the country are excited about this game. They remember, I mean, a lot of it comes down to they remember that last year it was an extremely dramatic, exciting game. It was the closest game anybody really gave Alabama. It was the most of a scare anybody put in Alabama. And there's great characters, too. There's great players. I mean, we have the 2 top leading Heisman candidates both playing in this game. We have Nick Saban. We have Lane Kiffin, 2 guys that are not only great characters in and of themselves, but have a pre-existing relationship with each other. So this just has all the makings of one of those games that even casual viewers of college football feel like, I have to watch that game.
Yes, it certainly does. And like you just said, quarterbacks, 2 guys who right now between Matt Corral and Bryce Young are the Heisman front runners early in the season right now. And what they've done offensively so far, Matt, has just been super impressive. These 2 teams are putting up a boatload of points. You just see him here when it comes to the quarterback breakdown here. I mean, Bryce Young has the edge, but Matt Corral is a playmaker and he's a dual threat guy. I mean, he is just does it all on the air, in the ground, and he's smart. I mean, whatever he and Lane Kiffin have figured out, Matt, it is working for this team. They are averaging more yards than anybody in the country at 630 plus, something like that, putting up 52 points a game. But when this offense goes, it certainly goes.
Yeah, I mean, this is an explosive offensive team, but I think one of the things, if you're looking at the stats there, that really jumps out that I don't think a lot of people have a proper appreciation for is that rushing attack. I mean, I think everybody thinks of this Ole Miss team as this high-flying offensive juggernaut that probably passes down the field every other play. It's really not the case. I mean, this is a team with an incredibly powerful rushing attack, and I think that's going to be the real challenge for Alabama today. Is we've seen what Florida was able to do running the ball on Alabama. This is a team that's arguably substantially better than Florida at running the ball, and these guys have been doing it extremely effectively. They did it really well against Alabama last year too, and they do it in an unconventional way. So you really have to be on your toes. You have to have great preparation for a game like this. You have to know what you're looking for. You need, solid play and assignment-driven play by everybody, but you also need really smart linebackers and players in the secondary who can assess really quickly with their eyes what's going on, where the ball is, where everybody's coming, and try to make a play, try to disrupt what Ole Miss is doing. And I think this is going to be the ultimate test for, has this Alabama defense really progressed since this time a year ago?
Yes, there's no doubt about that, Matt. You sound a little bit like Nick Saban when asked about this earlier this week, because so many people do pay attention to Matt Corral and his arm, and they tend to get away from remembering how good they are and how explosive they can do when it comes to the ground game. Here's what Saban had to say.
They run the ball. I mean, they run the ball and they run it effectively, and they're really good at it. And then they're really good at taking advantage of anything you do to stop the run. They're going to throw RPOs or play action passes to take advantage of that. They have man beaters when you play man to man, so it's very well orchestrated offense, but it's also not only well conceived, but it's also very well implemented.
So nearly 900 yards total on the ground for Ole Miss, rushing 11 touchdowns. They've actually scored on the ground more than they have in the air. And credit to Matt Corral when it comes to a lot of that, when it comes to RPOs. Like I said, this guy is smart. And I think that Lane Kiffin makes it not easy for him, but simplifies it for him. Like, these are your reads. This is where you go if it doesn't look good. And he's able to just make plays.
Yeah, it's really an offense that's built around enabling guys with a ton of physical talent and ability to go out there and do what they do best. And we know that that's what Kiffin did at Alabama. There was some great stories, by the way, written this week, and some on AL.com and some elsewhere too. There's a great one from Alex Scarborough on ESPN.com this week that I'll shout out. And they talked about, when Lane Kiffin first came to Alabama, Nick Saban told him, I've got a Lamborghini, but we're about to drive off a cliff. We don't know what we're doing with all of this talent that we've got. And I think that's really what Lane Kiffin brought to Alabama. Is he said, look, what's the way that we can get the most out of incredibly fast and talented skill position players? And he's been able to do that at Ole Miss pretty quickly here as well. So, on the one hand, Saban knows generally what Lane Kiffin likes to do and what his end goal is. But man, the guy knows how to get creative with a playbook. He knows how to do things that no defense can expect, and sometimes even if you're expecting it, you just can't do anything about it because you're leaving it up to talented guys out there on the field who know how to make a play with the football. So I think this is in many ways kind of I don't want to disparage Saban because he won the game last year, but this is kind of Nick Saban's nightmare scenario. It's not built around just going out there and going where the X's and O's tell you to go. Sometimes it's just about the guy on the other side making a great decision, improvising in the moment. And that's a little bit outside Alabama's comfort zone.
Yeah. Appreciate everyone's comments rolling in right now. This is the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone. He's Matt. Bama kickoff at 2:30 against Ole Miss, number 1 against number 12. Kiffin against Saban. No former Saban assistant has beat Saban, of course. Ryan, I'm not sure about that. I saw that comment a second ago, Ryan. I'm not really sure if Bryce Young's going to put up 100 on the ground. I would be very, very surprised.
that would be new for sure.
I would be very, very surprised by that, but I do appreciate your prediction there. But, we talk about this every single time that Saban plays a former assistant, and no one has beaten him yet. Lane Kiffin seems to have been talk about Kirby Smart, of course, but the last year's game, I think, was a little bit of a scare. You've used that word a couple times. I think that we can understand that Kiffin came out ready to roll, and he understands what it takes to beat Alabama. And not to mention, he has some, I don't want to use obsession, but he has some sort of infatuation with preparing for Alabama, rat poison, social media, and just all the things with Kiffin and Saban, and just this weird, I don't know, it's entertaining for us, but I don't totally understand the dynamic. But he has some sort of infatuation with playing Alabama and being prepared for this team.
Yeah, I think it has to do a little bit with I think he actually really appreciates that Alabama is such a emotionally, mentally stable program that it's really hard to rattle and distract them compared to a lot of other programs. But he also knows that that's probably the best possible way to beat Alabama is try to get in their heads, try to get them upset, try to make them do anything other than focus on football. And I think that's a little bit of what he's attempting to do here. I don't know how successful he's being at it. I think some of it is just Lane having fun because he's a strange guy with a very weird sense of humor. But I do think some of it is that. I think that he saw, I mean, look, he was present there for when Hugh Freeze did what he did at Ole Miss. He was around to see Gus Malzahn wreaking his havoc on Alabama in the Iron Bowls. And I think he knows that it's very, very hard to beat Alabama, but one of the ways that starts you on that path is get in their head, frustrate them, make them feel like this isn't what's supposed to be happening. And I think that's a little bit of the chaos he's trying to sprinkle in there.
Yep, absolutely. And Saban talked a little bit this week on last year's game and felt as though kind of his younger guys, and we know, there's a lot of criticism towards the defense at this point, maybe playing out of position. He's looking for that to change. He knows these guys are 1 year more mature than they were a season ago. Let's listen to that.
Last year we were a young group. They were going fast. We had trouble getting lined up. We were out of position a lot of times. Because we were out of position, we missed a lot of tackles. So I think that, we have to play fast. We have to get lined up. Everybody's got to be able to focus on their responsibility because these guys are really good at executing.
So he knows what it's going to take to buckle down and to play in front. Keep these guys in front, not lose contain. That's a big thing when it comes to this RPOs, what this offense looks like. I don't think it's a matter of looking back last year necessarily being afraid, but understanding that this team is dangerous when they want to be, Matt.
I think he's got reason to be concerned in terms of, understanding your assignment and playing with discipline in a game like this, because we did see a little bit of that breaking down in the second half against Florida. I think that was part of the concern that we saw there coming out of that game was even though there are a lot of experienced players in this defense, some of the key guys there are relatively new to their roles there. And one of the key guys, Henry To'o, was on a different team last year. He was not a part of that Bama Ole Miss game. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. There's no question that Alabama's defense has a lot of really talented players that are going to be out there on that field. The issue is how are they meshing together? Are they getting better at playing as a unit and trusting each other and understanding where each other has to be and is supposed to be on a given play? I think that's the kind of the next step that this defense has to take. There's no real, I don't think there's any guys out there that Saban says the only way we're getting out of this spot is by recruiting better. This is a pretty ideally built defense from a talent standpoint.
Correct. I totally agree, Matt. Totally agree. One thing that's going to benefit this Alabama defense, at least a little bit, is the latest on an injury report when it comes to Ole Miss. Jonathan Mingo, Matt, you brought this up in the pre-show, potentially out or is out, will be out for Ole Miss tonight, their second leading receiver.
Yeah, so a pretty big development there, I would say. I mean, you're already we talked about earlier in the show that Ole Miss's key offensively here is their run game, but I think a big part of making that work and making that successful is putting Alabama in a position where they have to be in nickel personnel or even more spread out than that. That's kind of how Ole Miss's offense is built. They're built to force you to spread your defense all over the field, put a lot of smaller guys out there, and then they're going to run it up the gut on you against a box that is a lot easier to block. So it's kind of a schematic thing that Ole Miss really needs for defenses to respect their receivers and respect their downfield passing game. That becomes harder to do when you lose your second leading receiver. They've still got some talented guys at that spot, but I'll be very curious to see if that adjusts what Alabama tries to do defensively over the course of the game. Are they able to, move into more man coverage at some point in the game, which could certainly help them trying to shut that Ole Miss run game down?
Yeah. Not often do I have an interest in what the other head coach is saying going into games, but because it is Lane Kiffin, Matt, I had to go and tune in to this weekly press conference from Lane Kiffin. And he was asked straight up, what is it that makes Alabama so good? Why are they so talented year in and year out? What makes the tide roll? And Lane Kiffin was very, very matter of fact.
Nick Saban. I mean, Alabama's been around a long time. They hadn't won like this, for a long time, or won big for a long time. So it's not like it's just a school. It's one person. So been able to maintain it through tons of different players, tons of different coaches, more coaching turnover than I bet anybody's ever had. And so it's by the way that he works. And probably more important than anything, the way that he recruits. They got great players.
Pretty matter of fact here by Lane Kiffin. He knows that it is Nick Saban. He went as far as to say that it's not even the school, it's one person. I think that Nick Saban would have credit a lot of people, but there is no question that the brainchild behind everything when it comes to replacing coaches, replacing players, keeping guys from getting complacent, it has been one person.
I think that's pretty clear because we've seen other guys who've come out of that program, even guys who've been there for a really long time, and you would think would understand all the different aspects of how that program works. They come out, they get their own programs, they become head coaches elsewhere. And some of them have had success, but none of them can make it go the way that Saban has been able to at Alabama. So I think he's right. It's hard to disagree. And, I think what will be interesting is who is that Saban assistant who can manage to take his program to the next level and win a national championship. We know that Kirby has gotten really close at Georgia, probably as close as anybody has gotten. But, is Lane Kiffin a guy who in the future is able to take that next step? I think it's probably harder to do that at Ole Miss than it is at Alabama. But I think that part of why this question is so interesting to us who cover Alabama and to Alabama fans is that we all know that one day Alabama is going to be looking for another person to come in after Nick Saban. And it's very much up in the air of, is there anybody who can come close to doing what Saban has done with the program? And we don't have that answer yet, but I think that Lane Kiffin wants to be thought of as a guy who can do things really well like Nick Saban, but there's no doubt he doesn't. There's no question that Lane Kiffin is no Nick Saban. He is a very different person. He is his own guy who does things his own way. And, I think that's part of what makes this matchup so fun. There's such an interesting contrast to each other. They have a lot in common, but boy, are they very, very different guys.
Very, very different. And Matt, while you're talking about this, I want to discuss the Wilbon comments on ESPN from earlier this week. Just going out of his way to, in my opinion, this was kind of random. I know some people say things on the air and on social media just to kind of stir up some attention. That's kind of what this was to me, because to me, Lane Kiffin, and if folks know you're talking about what I'm talking about, Wilbon on ESPN talking about Lane Kiffin being an embarrassment wherever he goes, just kind of like not being like this straight up stand up guy who's maybe matured as much as people think that he has. I thought it was kind of unnecessary. I thought it was kind of out of nowhere. I think Lane Kiffin has done a really nice job growing up, learning from past mistakes. I'm not saying he's perfect. He is a little goofy. He does do the social media stuff, but that's kind of his niche. That's kind of like, that's who he is, and he embraces that role. I respect that in a way.
I think, for one thing, you have to remember where somebody like Michael Wilbon is coming from. He's a guy from a pro sports market. And I think in that regard, some of the hate that you're seeing towards Lane Kiffin from guys like that in the media is very similar to what we saw towards Saban in his early years at Alabama. There is not to be a psychiatrist here, but I do think it sort of bothers guys from pro sports towns when a coach voluntarily leaves an NFL team to go coach a college team. It doesn't make sense to them. It goes against their beliefs about the NFL is supposed to be the greatest thing there is. There's nothing better. Why would you ever choose college football over pro football? Doesn't make any sense to them. And I think we all who pay attention to college football know better, and we know that there's a ton of appeal in college football that you can't recapture at the pro level. But even for a coach, I think that there is a way to create success and create something special for yourself in the college game that can't be done at the NFL level. And I think going back to what I said, I think that there are some people who will always view Lane Kiffin as the guy who was a total disaster with the Raiders. And that's all they'll ever know about him. And it's all they'll ever care about. But if he can be successful at the next level up in college football, if he can take Ole Miss to the national stage, people are going to start to forget that part of his career. And look, whatever you think of Lane Kiffin, I do think that it's kind of cool and inspiring a little bit that somebody who, yes, got a big help to start his career. No question. He got put in a lot of positions because he came from a family that was already respected and successful. But Lane failed at those opportunities. He went pretty much back down to the bottom level of the game. Yeah. He was an intern, basically. He showed up at Alabama and worked for almost nothing and tried to prove himself. Worked his way up, became a coordinator, got another head coaching job, and here he is with an SEC head coaching job. And nobody's going to give Lane second chances if he fails again. They all know what that looks like when Lane Kiffin bottoms out and doesn't succeed. So he's playing with his back against the wall. He knows that he has to prove himself and he has to succeed to get to the next level. And in that way, he's now become a lot more identifiable, I think, to a lot of us. So whether you want the guy to succeed or not, that's a different question. But I do think that it makes Lane more of a human being and more of an interesting person, that he now has had to work his way up from the bottom to get back to where he is. And he's doing it based on actual success that he's having.
That was very inspirational of you, Matt. And very therapist-like of you, but I appreciated that and agree. I think Lane Kiffin is looking to really turn things around, really not for himself so much as he just wants to see these guys succeed. Players love to play for him. We just saw one of the top guys in this state commit to Ole Miss this week. So I think more and more we're going to see big-time players wanting to go play for Ole Miss. I know we're not going to talk about that too much on the Bama pregame show. Folks don't want to hear that, but it's the reality. All right, guys. Bama Ole Miss kickoff at 2:30 on CBS. Before we let you go, let's take a look around the SEC. An early one. Y'all get your breakfast, get your coffee if you don't have it ready, because we're about an hour away from Arkansas and Georgia. Number 8 against number 2 in Athens. I think game day is in Athens this morning. That's going to be a heck of a game. 2 4-0 teams. Can Pittman pull the upset against Kirby Smart? We'll be able to see.
Jeff Stapleton going Roll Tide Simone, not you, Matt. So I don't whatever, man. Hey,
I don't know what that means, but I appreciate that.
I hope you have a good day anyway, Jeff. Regardless,
I don't know what I said, but I appreciate that, Jeff.
So I think, Simone, this Georgia-Arkansas game is fascinating. Arkansas is one of the most fun stories in college football this year. It's fun to see somebody who's been in the basement for so long finally being relevant again and mixing things up in the SEC. I expect Georgia to win that game. Not that I don't believe in Arkansas, but I just can't buy all the way in until I see them win a game like this. And it would be really fun if they do end up winning that game. It would change a lot of our assumptions. And I always like that. I always like to have my assumptions thrown up and tossed out and change the way we think about college football, make everything different for me this year. But we'll see. I can't buy into the Hogs until I see them win a big time game like this, but maybe they'll prove me wrong.
I don't know, Matt. I'm kind of bought in right now, but I'm not trying to get too crazy about it. So we'll see. Tennessee playing Missouri as well. Florida at Kentucky, State at A&M, and then of course the nightcap, 8 p.m. kickoff. Rather, if any of us are still awake. Auburn at LSU. No idea what's going to happen in the Bayou, Matt, but what a game to look forward to tonight.
It's going to be wild. I think those are two programs right now that feel like they are teetering on the edge, and I could see either of them going on a run here and having a better than expected season, and I could see either of them falling off a cliff. So this is a very important game for LSU and Auburn. It's an important game for Brian Harsin and Ed Orgeron for their respective careers at those schools. It really feels like there's a lot at stake. And it may not determine who wins the SEC West, but it's going to determine a lot for those two programs.
It certainly is that, but so will this one at 2:30 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Number 1 Alabama hosting number 12 Ole Miss. Going to be a good one. The Tide are a 15-point favorite. Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban. This one has everything you could ask for. The two Heisman frontrunners and Matt Corral and Bryce Young. It's going to be a good one. I look forward to it. 2:30. Matt and I will join you for the post-game show in the same spot right after the game to break everything down. We'll see if the Tide can roll to a 5-0 start in Week 5 of the college football season. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Y'all have a great rest of your Saturday.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.